This is the GK machine. I'm going to do a quick walk around and then a how-to. I'm going to spray some shrubs with pre-emergent. The tracked vehicle. We got our fill valve over here. So that's where you would connect to start filling. We've got a valve going into each of the 2 tanks on the bottom. So you can use one tank or both tanks, either tank. You got piping going up and over. So you would fill from here and it would go right into this first tank, and then it'll go up and over through the pump, sort of through the pump, over and down to the other tank. There's a bypass right here and a one-way valve so that you don't lose your prime. I'll show you that when I fill the vehicle up. So we have triple nozzle bodies. We use mainly 8008s on this. Occasionally I'll use the 11008s if it gets too windy. There's some 11008s on there as well. I don't use them very often though. We try to use the flat fan 8008. It just gives a better pattern. We try not to use this machine in the wind when we can. So now at the back of the machine, the first thing you do coming up to the machine is to turn on a master switch, which is underneath the bag here. It's off, turn it on. If you leave this on and the machine sits for a few days, something will slowly drain the battery. We're not sure exactly what, but we put in a master switch to prevent it so that we always have nice battery charge. We'll climb up the left side here. Unlock the door. And this is the interior of the machine. So to quickly go over some of the controls, we have our throttle, we have our main joystick for forward and reverse. It locks in the middle, so you kind of have to lift up on it and then forward or reverse. We have our master on-off for spraying. And we have our boom controls here. Left boom, blue and green, right boom, blue and green. The green will lift it up and down, and out and in. Same with the right boom. Up, down, out, and in. We also have windshield wipers. We have a high and a low gear. We have our brake to turn on and off. We can adjust the track width so you can see the piping that goes inside the pipe there, or the square tube that goes inside the bigger square tube. The whole machine can have a wider or narrower stance and can go up and down. So this is the track width, making the track wider, making the track narrower, and you got to keep them even. And behind here is right level and left level. So to lift the right side up and the left side up. We also have agitation here. It's mechanical agitation in the tank. This is the spray computer, so we'll turn it on. You have automatic rate 1, rate 2, and then a manual control for the pump speed. In manual, this will increase and decrease the pump speed. These are your boom sections from left to right, the center. 6 doesn't do anything. Boom calibration is in inches, so boom 1 calibration is the left boom. And that means that the boom is 80 inches. So that's just the end piece out there is 80 inches. The next section, if we push up, we'll see boom 2 is 224 inches. The center is 137, 224, and 80 again. So these you should never need to change. Speed cal should be correct. Meter cal is correct. They're arbitrary numbers. Valve cal is correct. Rate 1 is our automatic rate 1. Rate 2 is our automatic rate 2. We don't need to do any of these. Field area, we don't do. Field volume will show while you're spraying how many gallons you're using. So these are 400-gallon tanks. So when this number gets to about 400, usually about 390 because you don't fill them perfectly to the top, you'll know that you're just about out of spray. To change any of the values, so I zeroed this field volume out because I'm going to be doing a spray here. To change any of the values, you hit enter first and then enter a number. So I'm just going to put in 390 and then hit enter again. So this is what the machine will say when you're done with the spray. So when I go to my next spray, I'll hit enter, enter, 0, enter, and now it's zeroed out. Same with the rate calibrations. So rate 1 is usually for herbicide at 50 gallons per acre. Rate 2 is for fungicides, insecticides, and miticides. So I have that set to 70, but if I wanted to, I could hit enter, 100, enter. So now rate 2 is set to 100. So now I am going to start the machine, start the agitation, and fill up with 200 gallons because I'm spraying about 4 acres of new shrubs. 50 gallons per acre times 4 is 200, so I'm filling up 200 gallons, 100 gallons into each tank. I like to use both tanks when I can. It just draws much more evenly than from one tank. You can use just one tank if you want, but then all your weight's on one side and can run into some other priming issues with the pump. Since the pump tries to draw from both tanks, you can close one tank or the other, but then you're sort of sucking air from one side. It's better just to use both tanks, even if you're not filling them all the way up. So we're gonna start the GK. Key goes in, turn. You have to make sure this is in the center locked position or it won't start. And I'm gonna turn on the agitation because I'm gonna start filling the tanks and I want it to mix well. Okay, I've connected the hose from the fill station to the GK. Now we have to set the valves correctly in order to fill both tanks evenly. So since this side of the tank is connected right to the hose, basically it wants to fill faster than this side of the tank because it has to go all the way up and over and there's more resistance. So this tank will fill slower than this tank. And that's okay depending on what you're doing. I like to fill them relatively evenly at the beginning if I'm using the inductor. The inductor over here. That way there's an even amount of chemical in both tanks. It doesn't really matter most of the time because it's going to draw evenly from both sides of the GK anyway. So if one tank has more concentration than the other, it'll even itself out while you're spraying. But I like to take variables out if I can, so I like to fill them relatively evenly. In order to do that, I close this valve partially. That way there's a little restriction into that tank, and that'll even about the restriction of it having to go all the way up and over to this tank. So this tank has a one-way valve right here. This will only allow water to go up. So we can't force the liquid down through this. That's why we have a bypass here. So while filling, you have to open the bypass valve. Now it can go down and over into this tank as well. When we're done filling, I'll want to close this valve. Otherwise, it'll allow the liquid to drain out of the pump and have just air in this hose, and then we won't have a good prime. So while we're spraying, we want the bypass closed. While we're filling, we want the bypass open. So now everything is open and ready to go. We'll turn on the pump, open this valve, and then start adding the chemical through the inductor. All right, so I'm gonna turn the pump on, open the valve, open this valve, and now we're filling. So this is going through the inductor, so I'm ready to add my chemical. The way these are set up is to come out of the pump, arrows, go through the inductor, back down and into the tank. When I'm done using the inductor, I will close this valve and turn this the other way so it'll go directly into the tank. So I'm gonna start adding chemical to the inductor. I'll add a little bit here, but I don't wanna do this on camera because I need 2 hands to be safe. Let me just do a little bit here. You can see what the inductor does. So it just draws the chemical in. You can close the inductor and open this, and that'll rinse out the chemical from the inside. All right, so I finished adding the chemical to the inductor. On the sight glasses here, you can see where the level is and the volumes are written. So we're gonna fill each tank up to about 100. So they go up to 175, all the way full is 200. So half the tank is about at these about mounting points. So we're getting close to 100 gallons in this tank. And over here, here's the level right here. So this one's a little lower. It's hard to fill them perfectly even, and that's okay. Like I said, it'll draw from both tanks, so we'll be okay. So I'm actually gonna open this all the way now, let this one get up to 100 gallons, and then close this valve so it'll only fill the other tank. All right, so this tank is now at 100 gallons, and this tank is getting there. You can see the level right here. I like to replace these sight glasses about once a year because they do get kind of gunked up. So we're gonna get close to the 100 gallons. And then I'm gonna turn off the pump. And then I'm gonna turn off the valve here so we don't get anything going backwards. Close this. So now everything's closed off. I'm gonna take this off. Then I have to reset my valves. So I want both tanks to be drawing. So they're both open, and I have to close the bypass. So now we should be all primed and ready to spray. If you're going to fill the tanks all the way up, there's not really a great way to see when it's totally full. The sight glass, over here, I'm on top of the machine now. The sight glass will only get you up to about 175. Then you actually have to look in the tank and be careful so that you don't overfill. So once it gets to the top, you can close off the valve leading into that tank and then fill the other tank. Done filling. Put the cap on. Okay, now for driving. Our tanks are full. Well, they're at 100 gallons each, and we're gonna start moving. This machine can get real jumpy when you're turning. There's a high and a low gear. For moving around, normally you'll use low gear. For spraying, it'll be low gear. For turning, low gear. High gear is really only when you're on a straightaway, because if you need to turn in high gear, there's not enough pump pressure to actually turn and go that fast at the same time. So you'll notice that things will slow way down as you're trying to turn. So usually I go on the straightaways on high, and when I get to a turn, I slow down, switch into low gear carefully, because if you switch into low gear at a high speed, it'll jump to the low gear and jolt you really bad. So you almost want to be at a stop or stopped when you switch the gear from high to low. You can switch from low to high anytime. That's not a problem on the machine. But when you're driving, you never want to turn the steering wheel unless you're moving and moving decently. And you never want to turn the steering wheel hard. Turn the steering wheel slowly and kind of deliberately. Okay, so I'm going to turn the brake off, rev up to 1800 RPMs, lift up on the joystick, and go forward slowly. So now we're moving. We have to watch our tips and everything, because they stick out a long way along the back. So if you turn without paying attention, you'll hit something. So for turning, you want to turn very slowly and deliberately. Like I was saying, you never want to jerk the steering wheel. So I'm going to turn slowly. And you never want to just, because it'll jump on you. You know, it really bounces. So you kind of just want to take it real easy while you're turning. Never turn the steering wheel all the way. Otherwise, one track will go and the other will not, and you'll scrape up a lot of dirt. It can get really bad. So that was a nice turn, and you can see we still scraped up a little bit. And that's totally fine. But you never want to make a real sharp turn with the GK. You'll really tear things up. Okay, so I'm going to turn slowly, kind of get onto my straightaway. So I have a long straight shot here. So I'm going to switch it into high. Now we're going a little faster. Might have to slow down. You see the RPMs went down there. Sometimes the hydraulics can get overloaded. So now we're in high gear. We can increase our RPMs if we want. Let me change this to the speed. So we're going 5 miles an hour. We can increase the speed. And 7-8 miles an hour is about as fast as you get with this machine. So this is about all we do. I will drive up to the field and then I'll show you how to start spraying. Okay, the last time I was spraying with this machine, I was spraying trees. So the track width is too wide right now. So I need to narrow in the track for shrubs. Always remember to do that or you'll run over a lot of stuff. So I'm going to be pushing the left track in. And you want to be moving while you do this. You can't do this at a stop. It's too hard on the track. So I'm going to push the button, have the track come in to about there. That will be about right for shrubs. I'm going to do that to the other side as well. And when I start driving into the shrubs, I'm going to check that my tracks are in the right position. It's a little hard to see right here, but I've driven into the field to check my track width. Where the sign is right there is one row and the other row is right here, 44 inches apart. You can see my track is centered on it. Let's see over here. Same over here. There's the tag for one row and the other row is over here. So my track's about in the middle. So you want to make sure that your tracks are in the right position. Otherwise, like I said, you're going to run over a lot of plants. I'm now set up for my first pass. So I am going to open up the boom. So on the controller, I'm going to do the right boom first and then the left boom. Unlike the Rogator, you only want to use one switch at a time. Doesn't have enough hydraulic pressure to do two. So first I'm going to push down on this to raise the boom up. There's a little cradle back here that it sits in. So I'm going to raise it up. And then I'm going to push the blue button out to swing the boom out. I'm going to get that all the way out, holding down the button. Now I'm going to push up and lower it down to get about level. Same thing with the other side, up and over with the other switches. It's not the fastest thing in the world. Level it out. Then this black button raises and lowers the entire boom down. So if I push it left, it'll lower the boom down. So there goes the boom down. You lower it almost all the way down, so now we're about level. Now I have to clear the boom of water. If you don't do that, the first 10 or 15 gallons you spray will be just water and obviously not effective. So I am going to leave it in manual for now. I set my field volume to 0. I'm going to flip the silver switch down that turns on the pump and increase the pressure. Hold up on the silver button until I see about 30 psi on the gauge over here. Alright, we got about 30. So I just pressed up on this until I got about 30. I'm going to watch my field volume. I'm actually going to start driving a little bit because I don't want to, once I start having chemical come out of the boom, I don't want to have it all pool in one place. So I'm going to get about 10 to 15 gallons out until the booms are cleared of water and have herbicide. Whoops. Okay, so we're about good there. Alright, now I'm going to flip it to rate 1 to check my rate, 50 gallons per acre. Great. Go back to field volume. I'm going to flip this switch to rate 1 so that it'll automatically spray. So when I start driving, this will tell me my actual rate. And hopefully it'll be 50 gallons. You got to drive about 2.5, 3 miles an hour. I'm also going to watch my pressure, that my pressure stays between 35, 40, 45 psi. We got about a 7-8 mile an hour wind right now, so I want to keep that on the lower end, around 30 psi, just to prevent some drift. I did put a drift aid in the tank as well, interlock, to try to prevent some of the drift too. So I'm going to start driving here and flip the silver switch to start spraying and then watch my actual rate. I flipped off the fifth boom section here, the end section. Because of the way this field is, you can see that the first little part, there's grass here, and then it goes to a bigger, more rows. So I'm actually not going to spray with the end so that I don't spray the grass too much. I'll spray a little bit of overlap with the end of the boom, but I want to make sure I have good coverage too. Okay, so I'm at 1800 RPMs. I'm going to start driving about 3 miles per hour. I'm going to flip the silver switch down to start the pump. I'm going to watch my rate, and I'm going to watch my spray pressure. So here we go. Switch on. Spraying at 50, 60. It should figure itself out. 50 gallons per acre. We're a little low on our pressure, so I'm going to increase my speed, increase the RPMs. So we're at about 30 PSI. We're at 50 gallons per acre. I'm getting a little spray on the grass over here. I'm watching my rows. Driving down the center so I don't run anything over. You can see my tracks. So we're doing well. All right, now I'm spraying in the bigger section. Watching my plants, watching my pressure, about 35 PSI right now. Watching all the booms, make sure everything's going well. Watching my rate, 50 gallons per acre. Very good. You can also see my field volume going up as I'm spraying. So right now I've sprayed 50 gallons so far. The width of this boom in total in a full pass does about 2 acres. So we're at a little over 50 gallons or a little over halfway through the field. Okay, so we made it to the end of the field. You can see where the cone is. That's the edge of the end of the plants, but I actually sprayed to where the booms are now. You want to spray this headland area, otherwise there'll just be a million weeds there and all the seeds will go into the field. So you want to spray all the way up to the road. You can obviously tell I won't be able to turn around because the windbreak is in the way. So in order to turn, I'm going to raise up, black button. And I'm going to only fold in the right boom. There's no need to turn or fold in the left boom because I'm going to be turning left. So I'll just fold in the right boom. Like to put it in this little cradle, and then we're gonna turn. Always slowly with this machine. I'm actually gonna stop and back up and turn the other way because we don't want to tear up the ground too much. You'll always tear up the ground a little bit, especially if it's wet like it is right now, but kind of the beauty of this machine is that you can spray even when it's pretty wet. You can see how wet the field is. I'm going to go back forward, making a slow turn. Take your time. Boom's folded in so I'm not hitting the windbreak. And I'm going to count my rows and center up on the next section before opening the boom again. I am centered up for my next pass. You can see where I turned that it tears up the ground a little bit, even being very careful with my turn. So you can tell that if you aren't careful with your turn and take your time, kind of do a 3-point turn, you'll tear it up pretty badly. So just be careful. So I'm centered up on my next spray. I've extended the boom. I've backed as far as I can up to the windbreak because I want to spray as much of this headland as I possibly can. If I have any chemical left over, I'll come back over here and spray this little area. I can't back up anymore though. If you want, you can spray when you make your turn and drive this way. You can kind of spray this front area, then center and go. I didn't do that this time. I probably should have. I'll do that next time. I finished my last pass. I came over here and sprayed the headland area. We ended up with a field volume of 204 gallons, so that's pretty good. I am going to raise up the booms and set them back in the cradle and park the machine. One thing I didn't mention with putting the boom in the cradle is that there are these metal pieces that stick down from the boom that are for putting drops in for spraying trees, and if you don't have the entire boom up high enough, those metal brackets will hit the cradle, and also you get really close to where that nozzle is, so that nozzle can hit the cradle. So in order to get that attachment point further back, we have to raise up the entire boom, lower down, and now it'll fit in there nicely. Oops. Perfect. I've parked the machine, so before you leave, there's a few housekeeping things to do. Brake on. Make sure this is in the center. Need to make sure that the computer is off. If you leave this on, it'll drain the battery. That's why we have that switch in the back, to kind of avoid any of that. Throttle all the way down, computer off, brake is on. Turn off the machine. Let's lock the door. and switch off. So that is a complete start to finish spray of shrubs with the GK machine.